Hello, and welcome back to the Libertarian Solution videocasts. Today I want to talk about the growth of government programs and why they always continue to get bigger and there's more of them all the time. And I'm going to use the bond election a couple of days ago here in Tempe. A couple of days ago, back on November 3rd, I think it was, on Tuesday, there was an election in Tempe for a school bond, and there were a lot of similar type of elections all across the state of Arizona, and I would imagine all across the country. I also wrote a couple of articles about this. If you go to libertariansolution.com, there's one from October 10th called Tempe Elementary School District Bond Vote No, and there's one from November 7th called Bond Passes, Education Won't Get Better, We Lose. So this gives the details of the bonds, why they should be opposed, why it won't help education at all, if you're interested in getting to that. Not really the focus of this video cast. This is more about these types of programs, of which the bond program is going to be kind of an example of why this happens. So first I would have you look at the articles on the website if you're interested in learning about that. But there really is a reason why programs like this tend to keep getting passed, whether it's a bond for a local school district or subsidies for corn farmers or whatever it is. There's always a common reason why these things get passed and why government power tends to keep growing in this way. Basically, and again, I'll use the bond example, or I'll use the bond election here as an example, and but they all tend to work out the same. Basically, you've got a core people, a core group of people that support the program. For instance, in the case of the bond proposal, they're generally teachers, school administrators, basically anyone who's going to get their hands on the money once the proposal passes. And it's usually a pretty small group of people, maybe people involved in the PTA, maybe people on the local school board, a few dozen people who will ultimately control this money and decide how it's going to be used. And of course, the reasons that they'll say they need to pass, it's always for the children. They need it to increase, to fix decrepit air conditioners, or whatever it is. There's always some reason why they need to send millions of dollars to these schools. And of course, if you look at the actual statistics and the budgets and things like that, it's not really true at all. Here in Arizona, we spend about $9,700 per student in the public school system. Charter schools spend about $7,800 per student, and they outperform the public schools. And in private schools, we spend about $5,500 on average per student, and they outperform the charter and the public schools. So if you look at that, it's really not more money equals better education. And it really has nothing to do with education, but I'm going to get into that in a little bit later. And then on the other end, you have the people who are opposing this sort of thing. People who know that just throwing more money at it isn't the answer. For instance, being aware of the charter school and private school systems and the way they are much better budgeted for something. And so, people who know that putting more money into it, who just throwing money at it isn't the answer, understandably don't want to part with their money, because essentially something like that passes here in Tempe. What they're going to do is they're going to add it to the property taxes, and of course my property taxes are going to go up, and so are the property taxes of all my neighbors, to pay for this sort of thing. So we're going to be spending more money. We know it's not going to do any good, and so we're going to oppose it. But you have to look at how much money the people who support it are getting versus the people who oppose it stand to lose if it passes. The bond for Tempe was for $77 million. So that's quite a lot of money given to a relatively small group of people. On the other hand, you have all the residents of Tempe that are going to be footing that bill over the next few years. And essentially what that's going to do is it's going to, if you have a place, per $100,000 of your house price, if you have a $200,000 house, you're looking at your property taxes going up maybe like, $54 a year or something like that. Well, $54, I mean, how much is it really worth? How much of your time is it really worth to go out and try and oppose something like this? Are you going to go knock on your neighbors' doors and tell them why they should vote no on this? Even if you at your job make $10 an hour, you really aren't going to do anything for more than about 5.5 hours to try and get people to change their mind, because at that point it ends up being cheaper just to pay the taxes and go to work. So we realize that we're all kind of incentive based here. If you're someone who makes $20 or $50 an hour, the effort you'll put into doing something like this is even less. Unless you're have the principled stand and decide you want to make videos about it or write articles about it. Other than that, most people really aren't going to get too involved in it because they don't stand to lose a whole lot, and they're actually going to lose a lot less if they just, I mean, they'll go to the polls and they'll vote no probably if they understand it, but they're not going to go out and do anything about it. So this is why we have these sorts of programs going in place, because the people who stand to gain from them will end up gaining a lot per person in their group, for instance, whereas the rest of us who are footing the bill are going to be spending a very small amount. If you've got 300 people who are looking for $300 million in corn subsidies, each of them ends up getting $1 million, and each of us as taxpayers pays $1. So really not going to be opposing it too much, but you start to get these things accumulating, and they end up with half of our paycheck overall. So, but it's really difficult to kind of oppose any one of these individual things. So most people don't tend to do it, and this is why we always have programs like this continuing to pass. Why the majority of the time they will keep passing, and they'll keep getting through. People who are, of course, they have to look at the votes. They still have to get the majority vote. So they won't say, give us this money because we want lots of money. That's not, going to get their votes through. What they're going to do is they're going to talk about, what good the money's going to do. For corn farmers, well, if we don't get this money, then America's going to starve. Or if the schools don't get the money, then the children aren't going to be able to get educated, or they're going to be exposed to airborne diseases. I mean, some kind of horrible tragedy is going to occur, supposedly, if they don't get this money. Of course, that's not true at all, because if you do any of the research on it, if you look at where the money goes now, you can see that they have plenty of money. They just don't spend it very wisely. And if someone like me can jump online and learn about this sort of thing pretty easily, you've got to imagine people who are in it, the core people who are supporting it, the school administrators, the teachers, the school board people, that they've got to know this too. They have to know that, well, they've got plenty of money, they just aren't spending it very well, and they've got to know that private schools have a lot less money and they do a lot more for the students than what they're doing. So you really got to kind of question their motives there. Because they can't be naive to all this. They can't be ignorant to all this stuff. They have to be aware of it at some point. So it just doesn't make a lot of sense. I think you really need to start questioning their motives. If someone tries to tell you this and they're one of the core supporters, they can't be completely ignorant to this. So I think that would be a good point where you'd want to question someone's motives. As far as an overall solution, I don't have the exact answer other than to try and combat this stuff at a principled level. In more of a overall kind of view, instead of going after specifically the corn subsidy or specifically the school bonds or whatever it is, going after the whole thing overall. They don't need more money. They have plenty of money. They shouldn't be taking money from us. This way, if you can fight all of them at once, you can more readily use your time more wisely and hopefully more effectively. So of course I would recommend everyone tune into the Libertarian Solution radio show. Right now we're airing Thursdays at 8 p.m. in Phoenix. We're also airing on Sundays at 7 p.m. in Tucson, Globe, and Douglas. You can visit us at libertariansolution.com, read lots of good articles there, and of course if you have any questions, please feel free to send them in, and I'd be happy to answer those. Any questions as far as what we think on a particular issue, what the libertarian view is on something, how a free society handles certain issues. I'd be happy to tackle anything like that. I'd be interested in seeing what your point of view is and kind of like what you'd like us to go after. I'm Nick Coons, and I'm one of the co-hosts on the Libertarian Solution with Jim Iannuzzo and Richard Sutton, and we hope you'll be tuning in at libertariansolution.com.